We'll get to that. So let's talk about this year's JDG though, because that informs the conversation.
Yeah,
And
so
I think JDG is definitely like, for me, maybe it's recency bias, guys, but like I am also inclined to consider this roster as the best of all time, which is also why we're doing this show now, guys, because this new entrant has made such a strong case for themselves. And I think, not only are we talking about a team that is basically a functional super team. How many super teams have we seen fail over the years in League of Legends? This one worked, and it worked almost immediately, right? And it had such a good balance of players. So, as Dom has pointed out many times, their one crime was losing one best of 5 all year in the World Semifinals.
not even like they got murked either, by the way. Pretty up in the air series with a lot of play. I know.
This was like the weirdest amount of just like immediate rewriting of history I've ever seen. Is that like as soon as the series ended, they're like T1 shit on them like 4 games in a row, and it's like, dude, game 1 was the only game that T1 won convincingly. Game 3 was JDG pushing up mid with Baron, and then Faker makes an amazing play, and then the game ends off that. And game 4, they were massively far ahead, and then Kanavi just threw like 3 times in a row. Like Kanavi had like one of the worst like series of plays of all time. And for some reason, as soon as the series ended, the narrative was immediately that it's like, damn, they got like shit on. Just because it was a 3-1 doesn't mean that they got shit on. BLG and by the way, 3-1 was like a much harder fucking stomping in MSI than this 3-1 was from T1 to JDG.
Yeah, and also, like, they happened to lose their one best of 5 in the only tournament of the year that didn't have double elimination. Like, that's just fucking unlucky in a lot of ways.
Oh, by the way, we should also throw that in. The reason also that their case is made a lot better than any other team that didn't win Worlds is because this year MSI was a dope format with 2 teams from each of the regions, etc. Like, I agree. Look, I don't go as far as dope. I don't think like MSI is worthless, but I do think like MSI on all past years has conditional like functionality. Like, for example, it does count a lot more in the years when there's only one Korean and Chinese team. If the Chinese team wins, that's a big deal because Korea is considered the better region oftentimes. Like, but I do think in past years, sometimes MSI, like, it's not equal to Worlds. This year, you could argue MSI is a better tournament, right? It isn't as prestigious, but I thought it was a better competition.
Yes. I mean, for sure. Because of its format right now. Yeah. So until they change the garbage Worlds format, it's, even though technically it's the most important tournament because that's the arbitrary weight that the fans have given it, it literally is not the best tournament in League of Legends anymore. And it's not the most competitive tournament either, especially now with 2 Korean and 2 Chinese teams at MSI.
Like, obviously, for people in League, that's going to be really hard to understand. But all I'll say is if anyone follows Counter-Strike, you should immediately know what I mean. Because in Counter-Strike, the Major has a worse format than Cologne and Katowice, the ESL tournament. So in Counter-Strike, we've already accepted that like they're the best tournaments, even though, yes, the one that you want to win for history is the Major. So I think it's plausible that can exist. Yeah.
Right. And because it was the
you
new,
just have to consider like your experience watching it. If you were watching MSI and you had all those like those best of 5s over and over again, you have the double limb, like how much more hype was that than watching Worlds when it's like,
sure,
all right, we just have like this match and I guess we wait a fucking week until the next one and then you wait another week until like the final. It's like by the time that the final comes around, it's like I literally went on a full vacation in between semis and finals. Like I felt like I was in a different a different year of my life when I came back. Like I had so many memories from like those 6 days that it was just like I didn't even feel like I was still watching a tournament. Whereas MSI was like 3 weeks. They got the whole tournament done. So many best of 5. They have more best of 5s, obviously, in MSI. There was no best of 1s the entire time. It was just a way better tournament to watch.
Yeah, and I think that does put up the weight of JDG's win. But I think the most important part probably for us is just frankly the eye test on this team.
Oh,
because what is so unique about this particular roster is that if you've been watching League Esports from the beginning, why you say this team is so good is because they were just so good at the fundamentals of League of Legends. Like the actual aspect of team fighting. The way they played the game was not necessarily about having like a one-dimensional play style or smashing you in lane, which they could absolutely do, by the way. It wasn't like they weren't good in lane. But it was that this was the most basic classic way to play League of Legends, front to back team fighting. But just the way that they did it and their excellence at objective control, the way they set up vision, the way they set up team fights, the fact that they could, I don't know if I've ever seen a team be as coordinated despite language issues, especially when it came to like hitting you perfectly timed from sometimes 4 different directions at the same time, like perfectly coming together from all major points in a team fight for flanks. Like this team was just so exceptional at all of the skills that we critique teams about. And because they played kind of front to back team fighting, they were always in every game. They were not reliant on a split push, which can go very badly, right? Like they could get themselves back into games from very deep deficits purely on the basis of their team fighting fundamentals. And so when you consider their results, which are 2 domestic titles, MSI titles, which they kind of cruised to in many ways, like LNG was really their only kind of barrier in summer. It's hard to argue, I think, that this isn't overall the best team at all times, because they have all of the qualities which analysts of this game prize.
Yeah, and I think also they had like such a solid like when we talked about the team balance of it. If you were to like go to most coaches and you said, what do you want out of a player? You want like the support that's godlike and engaging. You want the top laner that knows how to weak side, that can like lose resources and still be effective. You want the super hard carry, mid and AD carry, and you want like the jungler that is able to bring it all together. Like that is what people want to see out of a League of Legends team. Like that is what like a perfect League of Legends team looks like, and they were pretty much the closest thing we've ever had to what that is.
Yeah, on Monty's point about the way they won the game as well, this is also why, as well as the eye test, I think actually stylistically they might be the best team ever. Because think about the 2 ways they would win the game. They would either be behind and they could still win most team fights from behind. So you can see how excellent they were at team fight. By the way, classic trait of like G2 was like that, Moscow 5 was like, if you're amazing at team fighting, obviously you can get more out of it when you're behind. But then remember, if they ever had a league, remember that stat that was at Worlds, I think it was before the semis, where the stat was something like anytime they take the Baron, they end the game 2 minutes and 30 seconds later or something like that. Yeah, sort of 3 minutes was the cap or whatever it was. It was like essentially like when people talk about like the Baron and the Dragons, like mechanics to end the game, they mean in like a broad stroke sense of like a solo queue game. They treated a fucking pro game like it was a solo queue game. If they had took the Baron, the game's over. If you're slightly ahead, they win the team fight, the game's over. Like this team, this is why the fact that they lost the 1 series ever, if anything, it is the exception that proves the rule. Like if that was their worst day ever, well then holy fuck, this team was good. And as Monty pointed out, they never lost a tournament life elsewhere. They could have lost 3 other series and still won all the same number of tournaments. They didn't have to lose except 1 time ever. And even then, like there's extenuating circumstances. So I actually look at that, their worst performance ever. That really is the outlier. The rest of the year, they were just some miracle team. Like that's why I was always building that narrative of like, if they win Worlds, how is anyone going to say they're not the best team ever? Like, not only won't have ever lost any like series, but you just look at it with your eyes and you're like, isn't this the best team? I mean, I didn't think the point you made there is not even one to be thrown aside, Monty, right? The best team fighting team ever has people who are Korean and Chinese speaking in English or not at all. That just shows you that beautiful concept in League, which is like sometimes great players. It's like in basketball. They don't have to talk. They can just play off each other. You just have like a sense for how he's going to do something or what you're going to do. They had that like magic quality because we know this can't be like some team where if we had the comms, it'd be like Doinby talking all the time. It can't be. There's no one could be common it like that. So I also think there's some almost like say you say from day one, the roster was made. This isn't like a 3-year project that got good now. They really walked into a room and it just worked immediately with the most expensive team ever. It really is like out of a movie script or something.
Yeah, I mean, this team was it was beautiful to watch them play, and like I think we're gonna have a lot of what ifs. Like I'm sad that obviously the expense prevented them from like running back this roster, because imagine the storylines of SKT versus JDG this coming year would have been fucking amazing. So I, for one, am very sad we're not seeing that.
Yes.
I also, it also is the what if of, because of the meta shift that happened at Worlds, I do wonder if there was double elimination and JDG maybe had a couple, another crack at this. Would that have changed things for them? Would we have seen alterations to the way they played the game? Because they were very close in that best of 5 series. Like, it was, even though it was a 4-game series, it was an extremely close 4-game series. And if we had seen part 2, which is, again, another argument for double elimination at Worlds, because who would not have liked to have seen this matchup one more time? Right, this was a fucking great series. It was the World Finals.
I'm with you, Monty. After the 2 series we saw, I want to see obviously the trilogy. I want to see T1 versus JDG a third time. But there's also a world if you have a lower bracket where maybe Gen G just takes care of T1 for them. Maybe it's Gen G against JDG in the final. They never play a third time. Like, that's the other reason I have the what if, because I want to know what happened with the other team on the other side of the bracket that never got to play the T1.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, like, if for the T1 fans that are going to be super mad at this take, if the series was a massive stomp, then the Faker play is like nowhere close to the best play of all time, right? Yes. Like, then it just doesn't fucking matter because they were just stomping them the whole time. It's like, oh, he made like a nice play, but like the context of the game is that they're just winning, or they're going to win no matter what. Yes. Their win was inevitable. So.
No, and also you make a good case there, because essentially if you're a T1/Faker fan, you should want this to be like maybe the greatest team ever, because then actually Faker did like almost the tournament winning play against this fucking team. Like, you should want to build them up, guys. It's actually better for you.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.